maybe you know the feeling. Maybe it's a feeling you know today pretty well. The feeling of hanging on by a thread. The feeling of being pretty much at the end of the rope. Somebody hadn't tied a knot at the end of the rope. Well, who knows what might happen. The feeling of being tired, worried, scared. You've tried every trick you know. You've tried all of the tricks, and you're kind of down to your last attempt. Time to put all the chips on the table and roll the dice one last time and hang on for dear life and hope for whatever. If that's your spot, then you know about Jacob in the story that we read today. 20 years have passed since we started listening to parts of this story, at least until 20 years have passed since Jacob fled from his angry brother Esau. He fled to his Uncle Laban's house way up north. He's been living with Uncle Laban and working for Uncle Laban. And you remember the story from last Sunday. He had worked 7 years in order to earn the right to marry Rachel. And then because Laban and Jacob are sort of two peas out of the same pod, when Jacob woke up the morning after, he discovered that the woman that he had been given to be his wife was the older sister, Leah. So he went to complain to the man who was now his father-in-law, who said, well, boy, don't you remember, in our country we don't do it that way. First you have to marry the older daughter, and then we marry off the younger daughter. But if you want to work for me another 7 years. So Jacob worked for Laban another 7 years in order to earn Rachel. And then for 6 more years past that, he worked in order to earn sheep and goats and camels and donkeys and all the rest of it. And during those 13 years that he was married, 11 of his 12 sons were born. And so now, 20 years later, it's time to get out. It's time to move on. It's time to claim that birthright that he had taken through his own craftiness from his brother Esau. And as you read the story back in the paragraphs prior to where we started to read today, there's one more con job. Laban pulls a con job to try to get the flocks away from Jacob, the flocks and herds that Jacob had earned from him. And Jacob pulls another prank back in order to get even and ends up with a bigger share. And as the story is told, God even helps Jacob pull off this last con game so that Jacob can end up well off with flocks of animals. And then God appears to Jacob in a dream. He says, I'm the God of Bethel. You remember the Bethel story? 20 years ago when Jacob is fleeing, and he's fleeing all by himself, and he finally gets out in the middle of nowhere all by himself, and he falls asleep in the middle of the wilderness, and the ladder comes down from heaven, and the angels are running up and down the ladder, and God comes down and speaks to him. Jacob called that place Bethel. El is kind of the generic name for God in Hebrew, and various words get stuck on the front end of it to carry certain kinds of meaning. Beth is the word for house. Bethel, the house of God. This place where the ladder came down and Jacob encountered God. Jacob called that place Bethel. And God says, you remember that night? I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar and made a vow to me. Now it is time for you to leave this land and return to your homeland, to the land of your birth. So Jacob talks it over with his wives, Rachel and Leah, who no longer really have any place left there with their father. And so with the support of his wives, he packs up everything he owns and he moves out in a hurry. Laban is way over there shearing sheep quite some distance away and doesn't see all the commotion of Jacob and his family leaving town. So when Laban comes back from shearing sheep, he discovers that his 2 daughters are gone and his grandchildren are gone and so on. He's angry and he hurries out and he catches up with Jacob. Out in the wilderness somewhere, he and Jacob settle up their score. And then Jacob and his family and his slaves and his flocks are on their way back to the homeland, the land of his birth. But of course, Esau is still there. Esau might have his own opinion about whether or not Jacob is welcome to come back home. And so Jacob sends some messengers to talk to Esau. Esau, may I find favor in your sight? Esau responds by sending back some messengers of his own, and the messengers report by saying, yes, Esau is on his way to meet you. He's got 400 fighting men with him. So you can tell what kind of a showdown this is going to be. It's not looking very good. Maybe Jacob's luck has run its course. Maybe for the first time in his life, Jacob now gets ready to pray. At least it's the first time he prays like a patriarch. The first time he prays like somebody who has some heaviness in his relationship with God. Somebody who has some sense that God has laid a heavy burden on his life, a responsibility on his life, that this promise that God has given him through the birthright carries some importance and some significance. And so Jacob begins to pray the way a patriarch ought to pray. O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, return to your country and your kindred, and I will do good for you. I am not worthy of the least of your steadfast love and all the faithfulness you have shown my servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 companies. You remember when he crossed the Jordan the first time, he was carrying a staff, and that's all he owned, and now he has become wealthy. He goes on with his prayer. Deliver me. Deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, because I am afraid of him. He will come and kill us all, the mothers and the children too. Yet, here's where he really is a patriarch. He has the courage to look God in the eye and say, remember, God, you're the one who said, I will do your good. I will make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered. You made a promise to me, God. I'm standing up to you, and I'm asking you to keep the promise that you made to me. Having finished his prayer, then he sets out to do what he can do, because many of these promises carry a component that you and I have to take care of too. He sends a present to Esau. Now remember, he has become very, very wealthy in his work with Laban. And so he sends to Esau 500 prized livestock. Some sheep, some goats, some donkeys, some camels, all kinds of wonderful prized livestock, 500 of them. And he delivers them in three droves. Sends the first group to Esau, waits a while. Sends a second group to Esau, so Esau has some time to think about this wealth and this wonder and so on, and wonder about it all. Sends now the third drove of animals, 500 altogether. And then, just in case the gifts don't work, Jacob starts to do what he can to protect his family. He divides everything into 2 groups. Half of the livestock over here, half of the livestock over here, a wife over here, a wife over here, some of the children over here, some of the children over here. Puts them into 2 groups. So if the fighting men destroy this group over here, maybe they will have their belly full of blood and they will leave this group over here alone. Who knows? You're taking your chances, but you've got to do something. And so that's what he does. And then he takes all of them across the river to the other side of the river, puts the river between them and Esau. So they are all over there on the other side of the river, and he returns back to the side of the river where he's waiting for Esau. He returns in the darkness to wait for morning. And so Jacob is there utterly alone. He knows that Esau is on his way. He knows that Esau is coming with 400 fighting men. Can you imagine why he's a little anxious? Maybe a little worried? Imagine why he's kind of feeling like he's near the end of his rope? Can you imagine why he is desperate for some kind of a sign, some kind of a signal that God's blessing and God's hope are still with him? I bet you can't imagine it, because you've been anxious too, and you've been worried, and you've been at the end of your rope. And you've been desperate for a sign of blessing, a sign of hope, a sign that God would keep God's promises. You know the spot. You've been there. And that brings us to today's story. It takes place down by the river, in the middle of the night. And you know how it gets down by the river in the middle of the night. Everything is dark and shadowy, and there's all this mist floating around down by the river's edge. It's a place where odd things happened back then. It's a place where odd things still happen. And out of the darkness and out of the mist comes this stranger. A stranger who attacks Jacob. And they wrestle all night long. They wrestle and wrestle and wrestle. And in the process of the wrestling, Jacob's hip gets thrown out of joint. And as daybreak begins to come, now the stranger is desperate. He wants to disappear, to get out of the way before the light comes. And And Jacob will not let go of him. He refuses to break his grip until you have blessed me. And this is when you and I begin to guess who the stranger might be. We can't be sure. The darkness makes it difficult to see his face in the mist and all of that. It's hard to recognize who it is. But Jacob will not let go. He will not let the stranger go, and he will not end this struggle without a blessing. He will not let go. Not even of everything that he might lose in the morning. He will not let go until he gets what God has promised him. He will not let go. And you know about this. That last desperate act of faith. You're at the end of your rope, but you will not let go. You know about that. The man he's fighting with demands to know Jacob's name. And so Jacob tells him his name. My name is Jacob. And you remember from 3 Sundays back when Jacob received his name, that tortured pregnancy where Jacob's mother almost wished she'd never had these babies, these twins who came out. Esau came out first, and Jacob already had a hold of Esau's ankle, and they were fighting already, literally from the moment they were born. And he went on all the way through his life up until now, being a con artist, a trickster, a deceiver. That's your name, Jacob. Deceiver, trickster, con man. Something happened that night in the struggle. It's hard to know exactly what it is, but you've struggled too, and you know what happens sometimes. And so the man gives Jacob a new name. We can't call you that anymore. I'm going to give you a new name. Israel. There's El again, God. Israel. Someone who has struggled with, someone who has striven with, someone who has sort of gone toe-to-toe with God for a while. You have striven with God and with people, and you have prevailed. Your name is now Israel. You have been changed in a way that requires a new name. At which point the struggle ends, because Jacob now has his blessing. And Jacob called the place Peniel, another one of those L words. Peniel. Penna is the word for face. Jacob has gone face to face with God, and he lived to tell about it. He's gone toe to toe with God and lived to tell about it. And he walks away with a limp. He walks away with a limp to face the morning. He walks away with a limp to face Esau. And you know what I'm talking about. You know about those long nights of struggle. You know about the strangers you can't quite recognize. You know what it's like to go toe-to-toe with despair. You know what it's like to go eyeball to eyeball with God. You know about the battle scars that come after a long night of struggle. You know about hanging on and refusing to let go. You know about insisting that God do what God ought to do. You know about walking with a limp. Because the struggle always takes its toll, because perseverance always extracts a price, and the scars never go away. The scars never go away. So you know about the limp. The scars don't go away, but eventually the night goes away. The scars don't go away, but eventually a morning begins to dawn. And you and I, we go limping into that morning. And in the morning we are able to see what we could not see in the night. What we struggled to hold on to in the night. What we refuse to let go of in the night. Turns out to be the love who will not let us go. The love who will not let us go. And so this love who will not let us go takes us by the arm and limps beside us into the day. Limps beside us into the day.